Why do we collapse again? For the same reason with the same person? I wonder why the same connections repeat. Why someone with a different face leaves the same scars. Why we can't let go of those who have left us and only grow further apart. And what kind of practice is needed within that. Let's begin today's story. One day, in the Saatthi forest, the leaves were gently swaying and the sunlight was softly shining, when a disciple sat beside the Buddha and slowly, he opened his mouth and said, "Master, that person has left. However, I keep thinking about that person. Why does my heart still linger, even though I know I shouldn't hold on? If I start again, can it be different this time?" The Buddha looked at his disciple with a calm gaze, and he spoke quietly. "It is not that you miss that person now, but rather the karma within you is holding on to that person. You are not unable to forget the connection, but rather you are facing the emotions you couldn't let go of within that connection." The disciple bowed his head and spoke, "Master, the same thing keeps happening. Even when I meet different people, we end up drifting apart for the same reasons, arguing with the same words, and only leaving the same regrets. Is it because I haven't let go enough yet?" The Buddha spoke while looking at the wind on a branch. "What you are holding is not a person, but your unfinished karma within. Although the connection has been severed, the feelings have not ended, so you will meet the same person again, in a different form. Therefore, if you truly wish to let go, do not hold on to that person instead. You must first let go of those feelings. Do not hold on to someone who is leaving. That connection is not over, rather, you have already learned everything you needed to learn from it. A forced connection will ultimately collapse again, under the same wounds. Now, a heart that can let go, will be the path to cutting your karma and creating blessings, rather than a hand that tries to hold on. Chapter 2. Why do the same connections repeat? The wind in the forest was still quiet, and the heart of the disciple sitting next to the Buddha was still trembling, not yet settled. The disciple said, "Master, I miss the person who has left. The words that person said to me, the gaze that looked at me, even the season and the street from that time, keep coming to mind. I feel like I will never have such a connection again. And the desire to hold on, and hope that person will return stays in me, like a prayer. However, on the other hand, I also know that if I meet that person again, we will end up fighting for the same reasons. Yet, that feeling does not disappear." The Buddha listened to his disciple for a moment, and then spoke slowly. "You are not holding on to the person, but rather holding on to your feelings that are being repeated. Through that person, I will test you again, through emotions that have not yet ended. So even if you meet someone else, you will ultimately repeat the same wounds and experience the same breakup." You asked, "Why do similar people keep approaching me? And why do I end up drifting apart from them for the same reasons?" The reason is that there is still an unresolved knot within you. That knot did not start with that person. It has been somewhere deep inside you for a long time, and until it is untied, it will come back to you with a similar face. If a person has changed, but the feelings remain the same, and the wounds keep repeating, it is a sign that karma is flowing. Relationships are not something that comes from the outside, but rather a mirror created by the emotions within me. If you do not recognize that feeling, the connection will return in another form. You must first examine your feelings that you have not yet sorted out within that connection. The Buddha spoke quietly. What binds us is not fate, but emotion, and that emotion becomes karma, bringing you back to the same place. What you need to let go of now is not the person, but the emotions that flowed towards that person. Only when you can let go of those emotions does the connection truly end, and that karma will also disappear. A third story of wounds that repeat in connection. A disciple's confession. Another disciple approached the Buddha with a heavy face. Like the deep night, he silently knelt down and sat. After a long silence, he opened his mouth. "Master, I have been repeating pain for a long time under the name of love. At first, I didn't understand why that person was making it difficult for me. They kept pushing me away and distancing themselves. They would come close, leave the same wounds, and then depart. So I couldn't let go. I wanted to overcome it, even if it meant loving him more, for all the pain he caused me. So I endured and endured, holding on and holding on. And when I thought the wounds were nothing, that person left again. However, what is more painful is the fact that the other people I met after that person also ended up hurting me in the same way. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. I thought the second time could also be the same. But when similar connections, similar farewells, and the same heartache repeated for the third and fourth time, I realized the problem was me. I was creating the same connections while carrying the same emotions. So I came here today because I want to quit that profession. The Buddha quietly gazed into the eyes of his disciple and slowly opened his mouth. You were not holding on to love, but rather the pain that remained within that love. That pain has been repeated through you without ending. And even when you meet someone new, you cannot see that connection clearly, coloring it with past emotions and continuing the same karma once again. It was not that you held on to the person, but rather that you could not let go of the emotions. And those emotions attracted a similar person to you once more, breaking your heart in the same way. Therefore, you must never return to the same person again. Nor should you meet a new person with the same mindset. Changing people does not end your karma. When you observe your emotions and let them go, only then does the cycle of karma break. Just as you have come to this place today, the heart of one who is aware of that karma is already half at peace. You know now that there are more emotions to let go of than connections to hold on to. Master, should I then sort out the same connections? After the disciples' confession, the forest became quiet again. After a moment, the disciple asked the Buddha again, Master, I reflected on what I heard while listening to the story. I have been hurt by the same person, and even if I change people, I end up repeating the same pain. Then, is it better to cut ties with that relationship now, even though my heart still remains? If I collapse again for the same reason, it wouldn't be a relationship, but rather karma. I now want to organize that connection within my heart, rather than hold on to it. Is that all right, Master? The Buddha listened to his disciples' words until the end, and replied with a calm gaze. You are not letting go of a person right now, but rather you have embarked on the path of organizing your heart. The end of a connection does not happen because the person has left, but because that connection has transformed into something else within you. If you no longer have anything to learn from that person, then that connection has come to an end. Do not force it to continue. You must quietly let it go. Letting go of a person does not mean turning your back coldly, but rather leaving gratitude and closure on the emotions shared with that person, and quietly closing the door of your heart. An unresolved connection becomes heavier. The more you cling to it, and the more it repeats, the more it hurts. However, if you recognize what you have learned from that connection, do not hate that person, do not blame the connection, and simply realize that you have changed through the time spent with that person, then that connection can become a virtue rather than a burden. The Buddha said, let the past connections flow away. You cannot force the river to turn back. However, the memory of that water having soaked your field can remain as a virtue. Connections are not meant to be organized. They leave a mark on emotions. The moment you sit here today and look into your heart, that connection has already become your practice. Now is the time when the hand that lets go should be warmer than the hand that holds on. How can we know when a connection has truly ended? One day, a disciple quietly asked the Buddha, "O Blessed One, I have parted ways with a friend 3 times. At first, it was a trivial quarrel. The second was a misunderstanding, and the third ended up hurting my heart. Yet, as time passes, I receive contact again, and I can't turn away from that gesture. Then I get hurt again, drift apart, and then reconnect. In this cycle, I ask myself, should I end this relationship now? Am I holding on to it too much? Or am I trying to give up too easily? I'm not sure if this is a finished relationship, or if there's still something left. Buddha, how can one know that the connection has come to an end? The Buddha looked calmly into the eyes of his disciple and spoke. The connection you just mentioned is not about relationships with others, but rather about your relationship with your own emotions. The fact that the person leaves and then returns, only to drift away again and come closer, is not their issue, but rather an unfinished connection within your heart. Emotions are flowing again. The connection is over when that person no longer has anything to teach you. If wounds keep repeating, and your heart keeps darkening, and if you are losing yourself in that relationship, then that relationship has already taught you everything you needed to learn. That relationship is not over because the person has ended, but because the karma has been fulfilled. If you forcibly hold on to a relationship whose karma has been fulfilled, it will not become a blessing, but will revert back to karma. If you have gained understanding, forgiveness, and awareness from that relationship, then it is now time to let it go. The disciple asked quietly, then, Master, does that mean I no longer need to open my heart to that friend? Is it okay to completely sever that relationship? The Buddha spoke. To organize does not mean to hate or reject that person. It is to quietly sit that person's name in my heart, so that it no longer shakes. If the relationship only brings you pain and leaves you with repeated wounds, it is time to put an end to that karmic connection. And you should say this as you sever that connection: I have learned everything from that relationship. There was gratitude, there were tears, and now there is calm. I will let go of this feeling, I will let go of this person, and I will embrace you again. The Buddha spoke quietly for the last time, that the connection has come to an end. We know when our hearts are hurting, but the time to let go of that connection is when our hearts are at peace. Now is the time to let go. If you let go of that connection, it will not be a surrender, but a virtue. The fourth story: letting go of connections. On the path of practice, the Buddha waited for his disciples' minds to settle quietly. And you spoke slowly. You are now quietly trying to let go of that person, without hating them, or blaming fate. What you are trying to do now is not indifference. It's not indifference. It is a choice that builds blessings. And a practice that organizes karma. To let go does not mean to erase emotions, but rather to allow those emotions to flow while holding them. The words that welled up one day, the moments that couldn't be concluded, all those emotions have remained in your heart until now, holding on to something. But now you know, to hold on to that person again is a path of repeating karma, and it is only by organizing your heart that you will be led to peace. As the Buddha taught the three paths of letting go. First, do not try to understand that person. Instead, look at what your connection with them has taught you. We strive to understand people through connections, but when that person disappears, what remains is the realization left within me. So, let go of understanding and embrace learning. Secondly, even if the last scene with that person was painful and torn, remember the beginning of that connection, warmth when you first met, the moments you laughed together. If that feeling was genuine at any point, do not conclude the entire connection with pain. Just because the end was suffering, do not label the whole connection as suffering. Thirdly, leave behind prayers instead of emotions from that connection. Praying to hold on to the departed becomes karma, but praying for their peace becomes virtue. Now you must pray like this: I hope that person finds peace as well. I will cherish everything I learned from that connection with gratitude. I will transform this heart. The Buddha spoke for the last time. Organizing is not about cutting away the heart, but about quietly placing that connection within the heart. The person you have set aside can no longer shake your life, and when you can, be grateful for that connection. It will return to you as a blessing. What should I do with the lingering feelings that remain? Even after I've sorted things out, I promise to move on. But sometimes, out of the blue, that person's name comes to mind as time passes. The scent of the seasons, the music that brushes by, and the landscapes I encounter all suddenly remind me of that connection. I've already let go of my hands, but why does my heart still remain in that place? One day, a disciple asked the Buddha again, Master, I thought I had let go of that connection in my heart. I don't blame that person, nor do I hope for their return. Yet, there are times when I suddenly think of that person, and my heart feels heavy, and tears flow without a word. In those moments, is it that I still haven't let go? Or is it that even longing becomes a burden? The Buddha spoke quietly with his eyes closed. You have let go of the person, but you have not yet completely released the feelings you had for them. Longing is not a burden. That emotion is natural, because you have put your heart into that connection. Your sincerity sometimes reflects back on your heart. That feeling is not a sin, and that emotion is not a mistake. However, holding on to longing becomes karma, and looking at longing becomes practice. You are now at the last door to let go of that feeling. Longing is not something to be forcibly cut off. It is to embrace the sincerity contained within that feeling yourself. If you can embrace even a heart that makes you cry, then that feeling becomes not a burden, but a virtue. The Buddha spoke quietly. The rising longing is proof that your heart is still alive, and it means that the connection is beautifully passing through you. So when tears flow, even those tears should be cherished. I do not hate that person. Thank you for that connection. I will now let this tear flow away. Longing also becomes a virtue. Chapter 5. What we truly need to learn. In front of parting connections, the Buddha spoke to his disciples, who were seated around him for the last time. A relationship is not something that continues because I want it to. It is not the person leaving who is cold, but rather that the relationship has reached its end. If you try to hold on forcefully, that relationship becomes a burden. But if you let it flow naturally, that relationship becomes a blessing. The person who left you may have disappeared from your life, but the insights that connection left behind are changing your heart in this very moment. So do not hold on to the person who has left in your heart. Instead, you should quietly tidy up their place. Leave only the fact that there was a place for that person, without any resentment, attachment, or regret. When that place is quietly organized, peace will settle in your heart as well. It is now time for you to practice letting go, rather than holding on to something. The next story is a prayer to quietly send off that connection. One of the disciples who sat next to the Buddha quietly said while wiping away tears, Master, I truly want to let go of that person now. I will not hold on. I will not wait. However, a small part of my heart still holds on to the thought that maybe that person will come back someday. Can I even let go of that? Can I even give up on that expectation? The Buddha quietly nodded and spoke. What troubles you is not the fact that the person has left, but that the expectations they left behind still linger somewhere in your heart, even if the person is gone. If their shadow is still sitting in your heart, it means you have not yet let go. You must wash that shadow away with bright light. You must organize that heart through prayer. The things you couldn't say, the words you couldn't convey at the end. Quietly let go of the regrets and lingering feelings that have been deeply piled up in your heart. Following the words of the Buddha taught his disciples a prayer for letting go of connections when parting. In the Buddha's prayer for letting go of connections, I loved that person, so I was hurt, had expectations, and was left with sadness. That person has left, and I was quietly left behind. I now acknowledge that the feelings that remained inside me have been holding me back until now. I will not hate that person. I will not curse that connection. I simply acknowledge quietly that there was sincerity in that time, and that I did my best in that moment. Now I release that person from my heart. It's okay if we never meet again. It's okay if we don't reconnect. I hope that person finds peace. I hope blessings flow in that person's life as well. I hope tranquility now resides above that person's name, and I hope that the connection in my life will no longer remain as a shadow of pain. I've turned this heart around. I've turned this emotion around. I even turned these tears into merit. Thank you, and goodbye. I hope that the tears you shed now are not an obsession towards that person, but a compassion to let go of that connection. May those tears become a blessing, and that one line of words become a release, so that this karma does not repeat in your next life. Letting go is not turning away. It is beautifully concluding your emotions. You are not just parting from a connection today, but quietly closing a chapter of your life. It is not about erasing that person's name from your heart, but rather about transforming that connection into gratitude. Now that person may no longer stay in your life, but the resonance left by that connection will become your compassion and allow you to warmly embrace another person. The tears you shed have turned into merit, not pity. The emotion you concluded has become not pain but practice. The Buddha said, separation is not the end of a relationship, but the beginning of a new life. And it is not the end of suffering, but a door opening to compassion. Therefore, you must now prepare to welcome new connections, a person who can love without holding on, who is not afraid of letting things flow, and can stay together, and above all, a life where one can live, cherishing oneself without giving everything away. True connections linger above that heart. Above that heart, letting go of a connection is quietly clearing my heart. When you organize your heart like that, a deeper peace settles in your life. That peace is a light that blooms even when you are alone, without meeting anyone. The tranquility you long for does not come from that person returning, but rather from finally sorting out the emotions that troubled you. The Buddha finally urged this. I hope that the connection you have made today does not become karma in your next life, but rather a blessing. I hope that this connection becomes a seed that quietly opens the door to the next connection, without leaving behind any more tears. And now I must tell your heart that it's okay. You have let it all go. You have endured so well. You have quietly sorted through all those emotions. A disciple asked the Buddha like this, Master, I have truly let go of that connection now. I no longer cling to it, no longer have expectations, and I have organized my thoughts in my heart. Yet, something still feels empty. It feels as if a great wind has passed through, leaving an empty space in my heart. Why does this emptiness arise, and how should I accept it? The Buddha quietly answered, you have let go of a person, turned away from your emotions, and stopped your karma. However, in the place where that connection lingered for a long time, it was not the traces of that person, but your heart that was sitting there. Now that your heart is empty, the void is what sits in that place. It is not suffering, it is tranquility. In the place where you have let someone go, you must return, not alone, but to yourself. So the Buddha taught 3 types of mental training that allow one to remain in that state. First, focus on your breath and sit quietly for 3 minutes each day, doing nothing but simply observing the breath, coming in and out. That is what stays with you longer than the connections that have passed. When you realize that your breath is within you, you will no longer feel lonely. Secondly, say a warm word to yourself once a day, Like a self-talk. I endured well today. I embrace myself for having endured this much, and for coming this far. That one word will be a much deeper comfort to you than the words of the person who has left. Third, write down your feelings and put a period. The words you couldn't say to that person. Write down the lingering regrets and unexpressed emotions that have only remained in your heart, on a single sheet of paper. And in the end, write this: I have expressed all these feelings. This connection ends here. Now, I will conclude this heart in tranquility. Emptiness is not the wound left by a connection, but the moment when that connection departs and you finally return to yourself. When you can sit quietly in that place, you are not lonely. The Buddha said, you no longer wait for that person. Now, you are simply walking the path back to yourself. Now that I've let go of that connection, I hope the quiet, calm resides in your heart as well. Today, we learned together that we can leave gratitude without holding on. If there was a sentence in today's video that resonated with you, please share it in the comments. Your one line might gently untie the heart of another who couldn't let go. We are companions who illuminate each other's wounds like a lantern. Thank you for being with us today as well. I hope a quiet peace resides in your heart. Amitabha Buddha and Devalokitesvara. See you again in the next video.